Hey everyone, welcome back to Masonzero MTG. Today's video is the best cards for Cube from March of the Machine. This set also introduces Battles, a new mechanic and card type. Will any of these cards be Cube worthy? Let's find out together. And if you agree or disagree with my picks, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and why. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about into your cube and what your cube is like. The one criticism for this set that I've seen and definitely feel is that double-faced cards can be really annoying for both drafting and playing. The double-faced cards need to be really good in order to make a lot of people's cubes, but I think there are a few compelling cards in this set that could convince you. As always with these videos, my disclaimer is that my opinion or thoughts are not final, and these are just cards that I think are cool. I also tried to pick cards that fit a variety of power levels and types of cubes. Not every card will be ideal for your Power 9 vintage cube, and not every card will be ideal for your cube that you put together from random junk you found. When it's relevant, I'll try to note what power level I'm considering when evaluating this card, however. Now, let's get into the top 10. Kenra Spell Spear is a little nutty. A 2/2 for 2 with Trample and Prowess is honestly playable on its own. But for 3 mana and a Phyrexian blue mana, you can transform it into Gitaxian Spellstalker, a 3/3 with Trample, Ward 2, Prowess, and Prowess again? That's right, 2 instances of Prowess. So you can play it on turn 2 and transform it on turn 3, leaving you to spend turn 4 casting spells to buff up your new attacker. Since the only blue mana involved here is Phyrexian, you don't even need to play blue. You can play this in any red spells deck, regardless of what the second color is. It's not that often that we get a new toy for burn decks in Cube, but Bloodfeather Phoenix might just be that. There have been a lot of Phoenix cards with underwhelming abilities or just too many hoops to jump through. But this 2/2 for 2 comes back to the battlefield simply by dealing damage to an opponent with a spell and paying 1 additional red mana. It doesn't have haste, but it does gain haste when you bring it back from the graveyard. And it doesn't sacrifice itself at end of turn either. Really good card if you support burn. Zephyr Singer is at a very interesting power level. It's likely underpowered in strong cubes, but possibly overpowered in more casual cubes. This makes it great for cubes that are somewhere in the middle. It is a 4 mana 3/4 with Flying and Vigilance, which is already okay, but it also has Convoke. Again, it having Convoke is fine, but not amazing. What really sets it apart is that when it enters the battlefield, you put a flying counter on each creature that convoked it. When deciding whether to use this card in your cube, keep in mind that it is less good if you have a lot of blue flying creatures already. But if you have a lot of tokens in blue or a lot of creatures that don't have flying, this card can bring a lot to the table. There are plenty of great green planeswalkers to choose from, but Ren Realmbreaker is a great contender. At 3 mana, you get 4 loyalty, and you get basically Chromatic Lantern as the static ability. The +1 lets you turn a land into a 3/3 with Vigilance, Hexproof, and Haste until your next turn. If it untapped it, it would be a lot more like Chromatic Lantern, but the fact that it sticks around until your next turn makes it a good attacker and a good blocker. The -2 mills 3 cards, then you can put a permanent from among them into your hand, which is a little like card draw. The -7 gives you an emblem that lets you play lands and cast permanents from your graveyard, which is obviously quite good. The other popular 3 mana green planeswalker is often Nissa, which can make plant tokens and put counters on all of your creatures. Now obviously these 2 cards serve pretty different purposes, but I think Ren and Realmbreaker is worth considering if these abilities fit your cube. The Praetors in this set are pretty crazy. You can pay to transform them into sagas, and then when the saga ends, they come back as the creature. Wow. Illishnoran seems to be one of the better ones in my opinion. A 3/5 with Vigilance for 4 is a pretty decent body, but whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or one of your permanents, that opponent loses 2 life unless they pay 1. This means you get to chip away at your opponent every time they block or every time you block. For just 3 mana and sacrificing 3 other creatures, you can flip her into a saga, which is a small price to pay in a white tokens deck. Part 1 of the saga incubates 2 5 times, then transforms all incubator tokens, so that essentially translates to making 5 2/2 tokens. If you sacrifice 3 token creatures to flip the card, that's a pretty decent payback. Part 2 gives all of your stuff +1/+1 and double strike until end of turn. If you kept the tokens from the previous turn, that means you're attacking with 5 3/3s with double strike, and you'll probably seal the game at that point. On the last stage, you destroy all other permanents except for artifacts, lands, and most importantly, Phyrexians, which means you get to keep any of those 2/2 tokens you made that you still have around. And when that happens, somehow you just get Illishnoran back. This card is absurd and does a ton. The backside honestly feels like a Planeswalker ultimate, but one that's far more achievable. I think if you can keep this card safe from a couple removal spells, you've basically won the game. Aphara's Dispersal is nothing too flashy, 3 mana to bounce a creature and surveil 2 at instant speed. But if that creature is attacking, it'll only cost you 1 mana. It's not unreasonable to want to bounce an attacking creature, either a scary one from your opponent or one of yours that was facing a lethal block or removal spell. So it's better than a card like Fading Hope in that context. It's also a common, so it could be playable in Pauper Cube. Plus, having Surveil for graveyard decks is nice as well. I think the backup mechanic is pretty cool and pretty easy to add to Cube, but most of the exciting cards with it are in the Commander set, which I purposely didn't want to include in this video because I might make another. So for cards from the main set with backup, I think the best is Boone Valkyrie. This 5 mana 4/4 creature has flying, first strike, and lifelink, as well as backup 1. It's a great attacker if you're already ahead or on par with your opponent, and if you're behind and have at least one other creature on the battlefield, granting this trio of abilities to something for a turn can really turn the tide. It can also break up a board stall by launching something big up into the air. It's not going to make it into super powerful cubes, but I think this is a bomb at lower power levels that are focused on winning through creature combat rather than just combos. I don't feel strongly about any of the battle cards, but Invasion of Ravnica is probably one of the better options. It's colorless, so it can be played in any deck, and it costs 5 mana for a 4 defense battle. When it enters the battlefield, you exile a non-land permanent an opponent controls that is not exactly 2 colors. Straight up removal like that any deck can have is pretty fantastic, and once you deal 4 damage to it, if you even bother, you get a 5/5 creature. That creature also has an ability where when you cast a spell that is exactly 2 colors, you look at the top 6 cards of your library and reveal a card that is exactly 2 colors and put that card into your hand. How heavily you include multicolored cards in your cube will determine just how good this card is, but removal that hits pretty much anything that can turn into a 5/5 creature later on is far from unplayable. Stormclaw Rager is a great sacrifice signpost for peasant cubes and is honestly decent for medium power levels and higher. It's a 3 mana 2/2, and for only 1 mana, you can sacrifice a creature or artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. You can only activate it as a sorcery, unfortunately, but you can do it an unlimited number of times as long as you can pay for it on your turn. In a deck that wants to specifically sacrifice its own creatures, that sorcery speed restriction won't hurt too much. If you're currently running Slaughter Priest of Mogus, this feels like a contender for its spot. Oracle of Tragedy may seem like an unassuming little blue creature, but it's quite useful whether you're in Blink, Sacrifice, or just blue tempo. It's a 1/3 for 2, which means it blocks alright early game, and it has an ability that triggers on entering the battlefield and on dying, and you get to choose between 2 effects each time. The first is drawing a card then discarding a card, always useful of course. The second ability lets you shuffle 4 cards from your graveyard with mana value 3 or greater into your library. These abilities of course work nicely together, letting you discard a card that you can't cast yet, then shuffling it back into your library later so you can hopefully draw it again. It's a solid little value card that gets better in certain environments, and I think it's fun and fair at pretty much any power level. Alright, this set had a lot of cool cards, and I wanted to quickly bring up some honorable mentions that just didn't quite make the cut, but still I think are interesting. Deeproot Wayfinder has a really cool land recursion effect, but unfortunately lacks the evasion it needs to trigger its ability reliably. Surge of Salvation has a really efficient protection effect, but I think it will be better in Constructed than in Cube. Rona, Herald of Invasion does a lot for just 2 mana, and transforms into a very powerful creature on the back, but it just didn't quite make my top 10, and sometimes might pale in comparison to Jace, because it has a similar effect on the front. Invasion of Kaldheim is a battle that I think is pretty decent, letting you effectively double the size of your hand for the turn, then flipping it into a late game win condition and card advantage engine when you defeat it. Nahiri's Warcrafting is a really big red removal spell that doesn't cost a ton of mana and rewards you highly for overkilling something. Sea Double is, in some cases, an improved stunt double that synergizes better with Spellsinger's decks. You can either copy a spell or make a copy of a creature at instant speed, and sometimes you can get both. Seems ideal in a cube with a mill theme particularly. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If I have the time, I'd love to make both a cube video for Pauper Cube and for cards from the accompanying Commander set, because it seems like there are some pretty cool cards there as well. If you do want to see those, let me know with a comment. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We're at over 400 subscribers now, and I'd love to hit closer to 500 with my videos from this set. Alright, see you all in the next video.